Yo, Mark Whitfield, man, how you doing?
My brother, I'm good. It has been a minute and it's good to see you. Good to hear
Oh
your
my,
voice.
it's been so long, man. I've been trying to see you for so long, man. But I've been following what you're doing. Just to kick into the interview, man. Do you remember what
Hmm.
the first album that you bought was?
The first album I bought, yeah, sure. The first album I bought with my own money was the 12-inch, 15-minute version of The Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang. Because my parents were jazz fans, so as a little kid, they took me out to see lots of concerts, and I was playing music in school, and we had lots of records in the house. But I was also a kid, man. Me and my friends, we had to hear the Sugar Hill Gang, man. I'm a child of the young '70s, right? So I had a 12-inch of I had Rapper's Delight, I had Breaks by Curtis Blow, and I bought Chic, Good Times. I had 12 inches so it's funny when I first started playing, would start playing sessions when I was going to Berkeley, just with, jamming with cats on the R&B tip. All my rhythm guitar shit sounded like Nile Rodgers. Because that was, Nile was Nile, Nile and Nile's guitar sound was king in the '70s, especially on the radio in New York.
Right.
And I listened to Freak Out, all that, man. I
Yeah.
had man. When I finally met Nile, it's funny. I went years into my adulthood without meeting him. When I finally met him,
Oh.
he was, he was in the room I was playing. He came up and I actually stopped playing and kind of geeked out. It was now I was like, "No, Rogers," and he was like, "What?" I was just like, "Man, you don't know, bro," because
Ah.
people are funny. They think whatever you're known for is kind of what you do, and
Right.
and if they don't know you well, he didn't know me. He doesn't know the scope of what I do. But man, yeah. Anyway, I got a chance to tell him what a big fan I was of his and what an influence he'd been. But yeah,
That's
so the first record,
crazy.
first record I remember buying was a 12-inch of the Sugar Hill Gang, and then I had a couple more to go with.
Wow, man, I can't believe that. I'm thinking
Not the
it
answer you
was
expected, right?
absolutely not, man. I was expecting you to say like, where's Kenny
Right.
Burrell, George
Those
Benson,
records weren't
man,
far
Barney Kessel.
behind, but yeah, as a kid, my parents, whatever music that I was listening to, was we already had it in the house. You have to remember too, like I was born in '66, so I got my first guitar in '73.
Hmm.
So at that time, media and entertainment was social in that it was a family. It was a group activity. Like
Right,
you couldn't listen to music by yourself.
right.
You didn't have a personal music device or something. We had a record. We had a stereo in the house that was the size of it was huge with little speakers and a giant record, and all that.
Yeah, man.
Television was something you watched together, and so we listened to music together. And then my siblings were older, right? So my sister Faye, she bought me a little record player. You had a box. You open the box, and it was a little like you play 45s on it.
Mm,
And so but I didn't buy. My sister Faye was 16 years older than me.
mm.
So when I was about 2 years old, she left for college, and then she left me all her 45s. So I had a bunch of music that was popular for a generation ahead of me, which didn't help in terms of me being cool with my friends because I was
Right.
already old. You know what I mean? Like I was
Yeah,
listening to
yeah.
old jazz and then old music.
Yeah,
But it
man.
actually, in the long run, was great because I got hip to a lot of classic shit that was influential musically that other kids my age didn't know about, and that came back to help me out later on.
Yeah. Um, what made you want to start playing guitar in the first place? I mean, you touched
Um,
on the disco stuff, but you're a jazz guy, man.
Yeah, so I will forever reinforce the idea that for young people, for anyone especially, but especially kids, children, to have an appreciation for something as cerebral as jazz and classical music can be, the
Mm.
best way to experience it is live. Like yeah, it's just to see it, right? And so my parents they were set up in such a way that I could enjoy, a good childhood. And they wanted me to be a well-rounded individual, and so
Mm.
they love
Yeah.
jazz, and they, and even they were older brothers because they had already had a family. My parents had 4 kids, and then 16 years later, by accident, they had me. Right. So now, my parents were same age as most of my friends' grandparents. Right. So so they just but they just took me with them everywhere they wanted to go. Because they were too old, they weren't partying and shit. They were going to see me, going to concerts, going to the opera, wherever they went, they took me. So I got to see lots of Broadway shows, and there was a music venue out on Long Island called the Westbury Music Fair. It's one of those theaters with the round stage that rotates, right? And theater in the round. And I saw, as a little kid, I saw the Duke Ellington Orchestra. I saw Count Basie. I saw Ella Fitzgerald with Oscar Peterson and Joe Pass. I saw, I also saw the Jackson 5 and main ingredient people like that there. But man, seeing cats play jazz like that, it was powerful, and it was. I mean, and I was listening to the actual, like watching the actual masters play. The people that had created the music, they were right in front of me. So I got a bird's eye view of what that felt like and how, and then music was still a big part of general education in schools at that time. So we had, in elementary school, we had an orchestra, a band, and a choir. And so I played double bass in the orchestra. And I took, and then that, but all right, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So you asked what made me want to play guitar. All 3 of my brothers served in the Vietnam.
Wow.
Right? Because they were all, they had all graduated high school. Yeah, they had all graduated high school in the late 50s. And so they were already enlisted in the air. Well, in the late 50s or early 60s, they had already enlisted in the Air Force. My eldest brother John enlisted, and then David and Roger wanted to be like him, so they followed him. Right, so they all enlisted in the Air Force before the war even started. So they were already in the service. Wow. So when the war started, John and David got sent to Vietnam. David went to Vietnam. John went to Hong Kong, and Roger was sent to Panama. The United States had a huge force there to help keep their eyes on what was known as the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? And so Roger was part of that force there. David was a big blues fan. He loved the blues and the guitar and all that. And so for his, and I think he and my sister Faye were probably the closest. They all 3 of my brothers came home. Thank God they all came back. But and so for his homecoming present, my sister bought him a guitar. But my brother David was tone deaf. Like, it's just sorry, man. He couldn't. It was a waste of her money until, but it was shortly before my 7th birthday, and he gave it to me as a birthday present for myself. He was like, "Here, little brother." He gave me a guitar, and he gave me one of his blues records. It was Lightning Hopkins. And David, of all my brothers, was the coolest in my eyes, especially as a kid. He was tough, and he was, a soldier, and he became a cop, and he had cool cars, and he was my dude. Don't want to be like David when I grew up. So if he thought it was cool, I thought it was cool. And so I took my guitar home, and I'm sitting there trying to, copy this shit off the record. I was like 7 years old, right? Trying to play like blues record. But, I must have had something that my parents recognized as talent or ability, because my mother was like, well, hey, there's a music store with a sign up for instruction downtown. So in the little town where I grew up, I started going once a week for guitar lessons.
This is in New York, right?
On Long Island, in New York, yeah. But I grew up in the suburbs, so about an hour outside the city. So I'm out there taking, weekly music lessons. And let's face it, man, I enjoyed the idea of playing guitar, but as a little kid, all I would do, after school was go play with my friends, or play basketball, do whatever other kids were doing. So I remember my mother, my teacher told her that the lessons were a waste of her money if I didn't practice 30 minutes a day. And old time people, man, that's all she needed to hear. Right? Like the minute she heard that, she was like, well, I'm gonna fix that. So she bought an egg timer, right? A little, and she would set that shit for 30 minutes. And
what's that old school metronome?
No, so it's, an egg timer is actually a little device that people used to use because back in those days, stoves didn't have timers on them. Like your oven in the kitchen didn't have a timer.
Okay.
So you had a little device that could go up to 60 minutes, and it would, you could hear it tick, 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 tick. Right? I can still hear that shit in my head. Tick, 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 tick. And at 30 minutes, ding, she could hear that loud ass ding. And she knew I had been practicing, right? And so the house I grew up in was 2 floors. And so I would sit downstairs practicing, and it was a manual device. First, I'd be trying to speed that shit up, like trying to get to about 30 minutes, And she'd say, "Well, I know what you're doing." So anyway, I had to sit there and so just so that she wouldn't bug me, I would just practice my lesson. All right, we'll do what we play. I played the scale or whatever it was. But by the result of that, when I got to the 4th grade in elementary school, it was the age where kids get to choose an instrument. Right. Well, I was already pretty good at playing the guitar. They didn't have guitar in the ensembles at that point. You had, saxophones and trumpets and trombones and flutes and the clarinets, whatever. And then in the orchestra, you had violins, basses, cellos. And so, oddly enough, I'm not tall now, and I was a little kid, but I was born with big hands, right? I always had big hands.
You got big ass hands, brother.
Yeah. So, and I had, my hands were big even as a little kid. And so, I played alto sax in the band. And I played double bass in the orchestra, and I used to have to stand on a milk crate, right? So I could be tall enough to play the bass, but my hands, to play it, right?
Wow.
And so,
okay. Yeah. I didn't know that about you, man.
And so I had a head start on other kids because I had already been playing. I could already read music, and I could, and all this stuff. And so by the 6th grade, 2 or 3 years later, I was good, and they had we had in my town. There were 9 primary schools, and the 9 primary schools fed one junior high school, and then the junior high school fed the high school, right? So in the 6th grade, all the kids in the 6th grade from the 9 schools, they put an all-star music thing together. Right. So I got to play saxophone in the all-star jazz band, and I played bass and all that. And then when I got to junior high, I played bass in the orchestra. And I continued to play bass for a few years, and even played bass in the high school jazz band. And I won a scholarship to Berkeley as a bass player. But and I was only fit. And at that time, music was really just a hobby. I played sports in school. I played music in the band, and I was working towards going to college to be a doctor. Right, that was my plan.
How did you get into the whole medical stuff?
Well, I'm the only musician in my family, right? And so my sister was a stockbroker. Two of my brothers were lawyers, and my other brother was a New York City police officer. And so the idea of being a musician, and then the other thing is too, I don't sing, right? And so there's never been a time in my lifetime when a musician thought about having an amazing career, making shit tons of money and being a star, unless you could sing. 100 years ago, in 1925, I could have been like, I'm going to be the most famous guitar player in the world. 1975, who are you kidding? Like George Benson, I saw him playing on television, which is really kind of what lit the fire for me to get in, to take the guitar serious down and get into that. But he played some and he sang, and and I knew right away that I couldn't do that. So I didn't even have this notion that I would go on to have a music career. And then I went to after I got through 10th grade, and then my parents retired, and they wanted to move all the way across the country to Seattle, Washington. And you have to remember now, the world was a very different place before the internet, right? And I mean that's an obvious statement, but the point I'm making is that what was happening in New York in 1982 had not even been heard of in Seattle at 1982. Those kids thought I was from Mars when I got there. So the summer between the 10th and 11th grade, between me moving to Seattle, I attended Georgetown University, which is where one of my older brothers had gone, which is where I wanted to go for medicine. And I went there. They had a sciences internship summer program. So I went and I studied physics and calculus and statistics, and I was there for 2 months. Cool. And I did well enough to earn a scholarship into the program that I wanted to eventually attend when I graduated high school. So
which was what?
So I wanted to. They had an accelerated undergrad pre-med program that if you did well in, you could finish your pre-med studies in a total of 6 years. So rather than taking 8 years, 4 undergrad, 4 med, I would go 3 years, 3 years in this accelerated program and 3 years of pre-med, and then start whatever else I was going to do. Go into my residency and all these things and pick a specialty and all that. So I was, for my family and me included, it was pretty. That was a dream, dream of a lifetime. And I'm going to be a doctor. So great. Man. This is what I'm going to do. I'm in there. But at the same time, I was not happy that, I was 15, right? And I was not happy about, I had never been to Seattle. My parents didn't give me the benefit of letting me go see it before we moved there because they knew I wouldn't want it to go, right? So I was upset about leaving my friends, and you get to that point in high school, girls are reporting I got a girl, I'm doing shit. And I didn't want to leave. Now to go to, and so I had an acoustic guitar with me that I took while I was in DC, and I spent a lot of time when I wasn't in class at Georgetown, just sitting along the river sitting along Potomac down there, playing guitar, and
what kind of songs you playing, man?
Just like a lot of just folk songs and shit from the radio and just any some of the songs I remember from band, just whatever I heard, I still the things I play guitar in the jazz band in New York because the guitar player that was there when I got there was 2 years older than me, and he was a badass. This dude named Teddy Castellucci, and you know who he is. The funny thing is, So Teddy Castellucci, he went to the University of Miami. That he played on his TV show. Well, it was a guy named Rick Dees on a TV show. And Teddy was his MD. But then he met Adam Sandler. Oh, shit. And Teddy Castellucci is the guitar player in the movie The Wedding Singer. The dude with the mullet, shit, that's Teddy. It was funny. What's funny is the way that the costumes they wear in the movie. That's actually the way he looked when I knew him, because the movie's about the 80s, right? So
bro, I got the same feeling with you, man. It was like, I remember when I was hanging out with you in New York, man, you were doing the open mic. You were playing at the biggest fucking stadiums, man. You're playing Bette Midler, George Benson, Chris Botti, all these guys, man. But then I come and see you at the open mics, and I'm like, you invite me down to this shit, and I was like, I'm so privileged to be a friend of yours, and to be a student of yours. But then it was like, you were playing these open mic nights, man, and you were like, who's gonna come up? And you open that motherfucker. You open them motherfuckers. And I'll be like, dude, I'm not following you, man. I'm like, I'm not
silly, man. You kidding me? You good, man. It was awesome for all of us, bro. That's the whole point of that. That's how you stay in touch with the music, because the music is a living, breathing thing, man. It's not about the prestige of the places you're playing, or the company you're keeping. For me, it's always been about my connection to people who play the music, because we give each other energy and inspiration and ideas, and we support each other, and and that's how we stay connected even after all these years, and we don't see each other, because those times, those moments, that's meaningful to us. It has a meaningful impact on us, right? That's part of our history. When I got to Seattle, and they didn't have a guitar player in the high school jazz band there, so that was my shot in the jazz band there. And then I won a scholarship at a high school, at a Berkeley sponsored high school jazz band competition, just in Canada, just right across the border. And so I had these big fights with my parents, these big long drawn out arguments. Where I was, because another thing was, I was graduating from high school a year early. So now, and I was already young for my grade.
You were fucking kicking ass, man.
I was in a hurry to be out on my own, bro. I'm trying to get out the house.
You were kicking ass, brother.
I was 16, graduating from high school. And so I wanted to go to Berkeley and study music, and my parents were like, hell no. But after several months of tussling back and forth, they finally agreed to let me go. And so I'll never forget, man. I'll tell you a funny story. My first day at Berkeley, right? we get there. So my mother and father, and my brother David, who was a cop. My father had been a cop in New York, right? So my brother David followed him. So that tells you who they are. Conservative, like tough motherfuckers. They don't play, right? And so my mom and my brother David's his girlfriend Jackie was there. And so my dad's got like my dorm room key, and he's walking down the hall, all sergeant, sergeant, right? And he doesn't knock on the door, right? Because he's got the key. So he just busts the door open. And I got 2 roommates, right? He just busts the door open. And this is hilarious. See, I can still see this shit like it was yesterday. So there's 2 people sitting with their backs. They're sitting on the bed, sitting with their backs to where the door was, right?
Right.
There's a dude, and he's a big dude, and he's got a crew, like a buzz cut, which was like, and then we're talking 1983. He got a buzz cut, looking at 2 cops, right? He got a buzz cut, and then and he's shirtless, and then next to him there's a girl, and she's shirtless, and she got long curly hair, and they're smoking a big ass spliff, right?
Shit.
So my father he's like, what the fuck? and they turn around, and it turns out the girl wasn't a girl. She was my other roommate, just a dude with really long hair, right? And so she turned around and they're like, yo, and the dude with long hair had a beard. His name was Gary. We became great friends. Anyway, he's like, yo, bro, what's up, man? And the guy, yo, hit this. And my father's like, oh, fuck no. Slams the door, and he's like, that's it. We're going back to Seattle, and we're going to med school. Like, and so right then, my entire dream was over. Right? And then my brother was like, come on, Dad, be cool. Hold on. So he took the key. He was like, be cool. He went in. He's like, look, man, y'all got to put some shirts on. Come on. Because my mother and we got women out here, and put the joint out. What the fuck? Like, we're cops. Put the shit out. And so then they cooled it out. And so my father let me stay. And then once they left to go home, that was it. I knew that I had found my calling, a place where I belonged, because I could do, I could do the thing that drives us the most. It's like, I'm with you, when people talk about the different kinds of music that I play, or the fact that unlike a lot of jazz guitar players, which you know personally because you know me, like I like to play lots of different kinds of music.
Absolutely.
But it's not because I grew up loving all these, because it's true. I grew up, loving Duke Ellington and Stevie Wonder, Nile Rodgers and Prince, Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen. Like, I loved them all. Yeah, man. But my thing was, when I heard music that I liked, like if I walked in, I saw you and some cats playing great music, I wanted to play with y'all. Yeah, if I immediately, I'm like, man, I like this shit. I want to get some. But if I couldn't play it well, that would frustrate and piss I would be pissed. I'd be so angry if I couldn't play it. If I couldn't sound good like y'all playing with you, then I would go home and work on that. And that, because I want, if there's music out there that makes me feel good, well, I want to be part of it. I want to play that. I want to be able to get into that. And I never liked that thing about, well, man, I don't play that. I'm above it. Either you can do it or you can't. And I'm fortunate that when I got to New York a couple of years later, a lot of the older legendary jazz musicians that I played with had the same attitude. They were like, music is music. The only time that they didn't care about it is if the music wasn't serious, if the intention of the musicians wasn't real.
Saying stuff like that, man. What have you learned from your mentors, like George Benson, who I think you're probably best known for being a student of? Like,
George is a freak of nature. Right, like even and I mean that in the most unexplainable of ways. Like the great guitarist Rodney Jones, who is probably 10, 12 years older than me. And Rodney was certainly George's protege when I was just a little kid. He and I were talking one day. We were doing a Zoom call with some like a master class with students, and he just asked me. He was like, "Man, how do you explain the unexplainable when you see George? You know, how would you?" And he said, "How do you think George even does that stuff?" George gave me a lot of advice, a lot, you know, because I spent a lot of time with him, and you know, I don't ask a lot of questions, but but it's not because I'm not curious. It's because my way about going is just to kind of let life happen, and information comes, and I pay attention. I try to grab on to shit as it happens, right?
Yeah.
Asking questions can in some ways limit the experience to only the subject you thought about. If you're just quiet and pay attention, you may learn some shit you didn't even think you needed to know. We used to rock the Village Underground, brother. That was our spot.
Yeah.
Man, that was our spot, man. Come on, bro. That was awesome.
Man.
We did good work down there.
Are you still teaching at Berkeley, man?
So no, I taught at Berkeley from 2005 to 2009 while my eldest son was going there. But I was touring, you know, I accepted the job at Berkeley the year before Mark Jr. was set to go to college, intending to be there with him, you know, while he studied. Keep my eye on him. He was young too, graduating early from high school and the whole thing. But the year after I took the job at Berkeley, Chris Botti called me, asked me to go on the road with him, and my friend, you know, my friend Billy Kilson was in the band, and James Genius was about to join, and Billy Childs was playing. I was like, man, I can't miss this shit. I didn't even really know who, you know, Chris Botti was just starting his career at that time, you know, so I didn't know who he was.
Wow.
We had actually both been signed to Verve Records at the same time in the 90s, but we were in different camps. He was on the smooth jazz side, and I was, you know, and I didn't know him and hear his music, but it didn't matter. If he had my boys playing with him, and he was going to start to do the things, you know, that he was talking about doing, I wanted to be there.
Right.
So we started traveling. I was probably gone 175, 200 days a year, and then some of those off days I would spend like one day a week, you know, going to Boston to teach, so that it was killing me, right? I was, so I stopped teaching at Berkeley, and I really, you know, I hadn't intended to teach there indefinitely because I live in Jersey, and I wasn't going to move to Boston. It's almost 4-hour drive on commuting train. It's too much of a drag. But and I wasn't ready at that time to really settle down and enjoy the experience of teaching. That comes for all of us at a different time in your life, you know.
Because you're so busy with your session work.
Yeah, well, yeah, you know, and the thing about that is, you know, I'm at my best as a human being. Like I'm my favorite version of myself.
Yes.
When I got my guitar in my hands, my eyes closed, and I'm running forward at 100 miles an hour. That, you know, I mean, that's the version of me that I admire the most. And so sitting still long enough to talk about things and play music and teach was something I hadn't even come across my radar yet. It has. And so I have a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot while teaching, and I don't teach traditionally the way that most people would, or you would expect me to. But I do give guitar lessons, and sometimes it's just talking, sometimes it's playing.
Yep.
And I teach a jazz history course. I teach a jazz history lecture at New Jersey City University every Tuesday afternoon. So I do that, and you know, I still travel a bit, and so that's good. And you know, I got 2 new records coming out this year.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I did.
What's going on, man?
So the first one is an all-star jazz trio. It's just me, Jeff Watson, Robert Hurst, and we call that GBD, and that's coming out on vinyl and all that stuff in June. And the second one is an R&B groove project that's kind of like got horns and all this stuff, reminiscent. It's kind of the evolution of the stuff that I was just starting to mess with back when I used to run that open mic at the Village Underground. And
Right.
I brought that part of my musical experience to a new level, and so it's time to release that. And so that record is done. We're mixing it now, and they'll both come out this year. I got Mike Mitchell playing Black Dynamite, James Genius, my youngest son Davis playing keys.
Sweet.
And then I've been spending a lot of time with a young guitar player who made it a point to catch up with me, and a guy named Isaiah Sharkey. And Sharkey, he comes and sits with me a lot, plays, and I've been helping him just with not with guitar playing, because trust me, the dude's he doesn't need my help with that.
I was gonna say, next to you, man, what's the brother gonna bring?
Sharky is killing, man. He's got his shit together.
Okay.
But he appreciates just having having an older brother around to help him out with different things, and we're talking about maybe me producing a jazz record for him, and just whatever it is. I'm staying active and enjoying being involved in music from a bit more settled perspective, and it's been good for me.
Yeah, man.
We got to grow up a little bit. Even us, bro, we had to grow up just a little bit.
Bro, tell me about your rig. What's it looking like these days? What
so, man, I'm so. If I could have used what I have now 30 years ago, man, I'd have been on a rocket ship. All I use now is so the guitar that I'm playing is my signature model. I designed a guitar for D'Angelico. And so it comes out for sale in a few weeks, right? It's called the XL Soho. So it looks. I don't have one here at my place in Florida, but it's a small body, fully hollow body guitar with one floating pickup and carved arch top. Ebony neck and all that, but it's versatile. You can rock out. You can do anything you want with it. No feedback. It's a great instrument.
What kind of pickups you got in that?
So I have a high-end Kent Armstrong floating humbucker. So it's a gold covered Kent Armstrong. They make the pickups now, so instead of being this size for a humbucker, it's smaller. Right. But it's a fully dynamic high-end high output floating pickup, and I had them mounted so it's close to the strings and flat across the fretboard, so you get maximum volume and response from the strings and the body and all that. So the guitar resonates. It's beautiful, man, and it's all over my new records, and I got a couple of very special people that are going to start playing them. So Sharky's going to start playing one, and Justin Lee Schultz is actually going to start playing one.
Shit, okay.
Yeah, they both. Yeah, I'm really grateful to those young geniuses for wanting to support the old man and endorse the guitar. Which is beautiful, right? That's awesome. And then I use a quad cortex neural DSP. Just it's a box that's this big, and it's got if you don't know the device, it's like the next generation of a Kemper. It's got amps and cabinets and it's not a modeler. They actually use microphones to capture the sound of these devices, and then this particular the processor in the device itself learns how to act and imitate the effect, the knobs on the actual device. So it's got amps, cabinets, microphone placing, panning, all these things, effects, all that in one very easy. It's even got a touchscreen, very easy, idiot-proof, easy to use.
What else you got going on? What about?
And I use 2 amps. I use one of 2 amps, either a Supro Royale 1x12, or this thing called the Quilter. It's a Quilter something Cub. It's 50 watt 112.
So I know you got when you and me were hanging out, man, it used to be the L5.
Oh man, right? So the closets are full, right? Like no matter how hard you try, not like I'm looking behind you, I see guitars and drums and keyboards and you're like, no matter how, you know what I mean? Like no matter how hard you try to not collect stuff, You just do, right? So I've got, I still have the very first arch top I ever bought, which is a 1970s Ibanez lawsuit model. It's exact, the body, the guitar itself is the exact replica of an L5. But it has a floating Johnny Smith pickup on it, and it's just, I took it out and dusted it off, and took it on tour about 5 years ago, and man, it rivals almost any guitar I've ever played. And I see now, whenever George Benson saw it, he used to want to buy it from me. I'm like, it's the toys, it's all I got, So now I understand why, because the guitar. So I have that. I still have my red Marchione custom hollow body that he made for me in the late '90s, which is what you used to see that all the time. I've got that. I've got 2 of his solid bodies. I have I've got a ton of D'Angelicos, because my man Justin at D'Angelico has been really cool, giving me guitars. So I've got a couple of XL full 17-inch hollow bodies and 3 or 4 of the thin line guitars. I have a Marchione nylon and a couple of acoustics. And that's it. You find yourself, I find myself playing one guitar all the time for a couple of months, and then I'm like, put that back, play this one. Play that, you find it, you find something that you can get out of one guitar that you can't get out of the next, and so forth. But I tried to roll as much of that into my new guitar as I can.